Hey everybody, I'm Jared from the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel, and today we are on the podcast of Mentor Minutes. I'm here with my buddy Jay.
Hey.
And today we are going to be doing another top 10 list for everybody, and I'm very excited to get into this one. Jay, what are we doing? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so today is going to be our top 10 table presence games. So these are games that when they're set up on the table, people walk by and they just stop and they want to look and check out what that game is. So that's the effect we're going for. And as far as the way I made my list is there's definitely some games on here that I know have some better table presence, but I hadn't played them. So for me, I only included games that I've actually played.
You know, I think, yep, everything on my list I have played.
Okay.
So, I mean, that wasn't really a consideration for me because I think all these that came to mind I had just already done.
Yeah, and in fact, I had too many for this list because I could probably do 8 honorable mentions here, maybe more.
I agree. There's a lot that board gaming has progressed into, and part of that is art design and table presence. And so most modern games, especially, closer to present, are just going to be more engaging, thematic, beautiful looking. Even if it's a Euro, like they're really trying now to incorporate a lot of wonderful art. Including the table presence of the game itself. So since that's kind of more into the design phase, I feel like it makes our job a little harder because there's so many great ones out there.
Yeah, it would have been easier 10 years ago because there were a lot fewer. But,
yeah, exactly.
Now it's almost like kind of, table stakes, no pun included, to make sure that your art is just really attractive. And especially if you're going for something like on Kickstarter, that's one of the, and minis are probably the two biggest factors.
So at some point you kind of have to say like, okay, well this looks great, but it's not that great of a game. Right. And sometimes that happens with Kickstarters. They kind of bloat it with components and miniatures and things like that. And it might look amazing, but maybe no one will ever want to play it because it wasn't so good.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm going to say, all the games on my list I think are really good games. I'm going to say that right out loud. So
I will agree with my own list. But of course, if you disagree, you'll probably let us know.
Yeah.
So if you're watching on YouTube, I'll let you know that you can also listen to the podcast wherever you are because we stream the audio to all the servers like Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever. And if you're one of those listeners that likes the podcast audio, but you want to see maybe what we look like, or
you don't want to see that,
or the covers of the boxes,
covers of the boxes,
which is pretty much the only difference here, other than watching us. You can head over to the YouTube channel Meeple Mentor and find us there. And of course,
plus lots of other
the channel has lots of other content other than the podcast. We do tutorials. We have a bi-weekly news video to cover all the board game news that happens. And
unboxings.
All that good stuff.
Lots of stuff.
So check it out. I hope to see you there and subscribe and all that good stuff. But enough of that. I'm ready to talk about this list.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is one of my favorite lists. So I love this, and a lot of these games are ones that I'll maybe show to people for the first time too, who haven't played a lot of modern games.
That's a good point. Yeah,
just to sort of show them like how game design has really evolved from like the days of Monopoly and Scrabble.
Sure. So. I mean, if we did this list in '99, Catan would be at the top, right?
It would
look how amazing
in the
this
top
looks,
10 at
right?
least. At least.
Compared to whatever else anyone's played at that point.
Yeah.
So I think it would be interesting if we revisited this list in a year. And see if anything changes because of how many new games have come out and will come out.
Based on the list, I already have games that came out last year on my list.
And that's what I'm thinking. So we could probably do this like every year, every other year.
Yeah, there could be some nice turnover here. Same with box art.
That too.
We did that one recently too.
Yeah, that was also really cool and also really difficult to narrow down a top 10.
And also, we should mention that we're part of the Gateway Network.
Yes, we are.
Which is really a network started by the Gamecasters that includes a lot of different content creators, some of which are more or less known, and in different genres. So there's some comedy channels that are board game centric. There are Instagram accounts, there are podcasts, there's YouTube channels. So definitely check out the Gateway Network and the Gamecasters.
Yeah, we're proud to be a part of it and always wanted to help out our fellow board game content creators.
Yeah,
it's a great hobby.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on and talk about our number 10.
Number 10.
My number 10 pick is a game that I recently played in the past year and a half, again, because of our breaks with last year's COVID epidemic, which is probably still going on. But this pick is Atlantis Rising, and it's just an amazing looking board. And it has not only a centerpiece that extends out these various islands, but it also has like this sideboard that has some really cool, unique keys, that like skull-shaped thing going on. And the theme is really nice too. And I feel like the brightness, the colors, it's just it pops on the table.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool, really difficult cooperative game.
Yeah.
And if you haven't tried it, I recommend you do. It's really interesting, and there's like these little sections of the islands that you're trying to place your guys at, and then depending on what comes out, you may or may not be able to collect what's there. And yeah, it's just amazing on the table. I really enjoyed the gameplay itself. So again, it's something that I enjoyed. And yeah, I mean,
yeah, it has a look. Almost, it reminds me of like a starfish. Because it's kind of shaped like a star, but it has
like 5 or 6 points that come out,
and they're all modular. They all fit together like puzzle pieces, and so you flip the pieces over to show that like what the ocean is kind of covering.
Yeah, like slowly these islands get like covered by water because they're sinking into the ocean, Atlantis. And so the outermost pieces of each island start flipping over, being like washed up.
Yeah.
But you don't really know which ones are going to be washed up every round. And so the closer you place your worker to the end of the island, sure, that's where the most beneficial
the better stuff is,
spots are. But it's also the riskier spots because the water will take those out first.
Yeah, good pick. I think the artist is Vincent Dutrait, who's one of my favorite board game artists, and so yeah, the whole production is great. So it's just
a cool awesome looking game on the table.
Yeah, totally agree.
How about you for number 10?
So for my number 10, I also went with something that I thought had a beautiful sort of aesthetic, and that's a game that came out last year called Honey Buzz.
Okay.
This is it's a tile building, sort of an economic game. And it's the theme is that you're bees, and you're going to these worker placement spots with your worker bees to gather resources to build out your hive, collect nectar, collect different types of honey, and then you're selling that honey to different forest animals for points. So the game is super cute. The artwork looks like something out of almost like one of those illustrated sort of like Winnie the Pooh type books.
I was going to say Winnie the Pooh comes to mind.
Yeah. It's it's gorgeous. It's very much like a pastel painted sort of style.
I think that fits with the design and the theme.
I do too. Because it's a light economic game. It's definitely family weight, but it's got some good strategy, and it's got great components as well. Like there's 5 different types of honey, and each of the pieces of honey is this sort of squishy, sticky sort of piece that looks like honey, like a honey drop, and it's also has that nice, texture that you can kind of play with and feel. So the whole setup, especially when you've got several players, the different honeycomb tiles are on the board, just looks really, really impressive. And so one of the nicest board games I've seen as far as art design, and that's my number 10, Honey Buzz.
That's interesting that you were mentioning, the tactile feel of some of these components, and I'm curious. If sometimes a game's tactile components and the way that they feel like increases its table presence in a way. Because if you're sitting at the table and you have something and it's like really, I don't know, it feels good to hold or to play with, you know, when it's not your turn or whatever, to fidget around with the components of the game itself. That to me adds to the table presence, doesn't it?
Especially if they're nice components or larger components. I mean, obviously there's minis. But even things like shiny coins, metal coins at the table, just look good on the table sitting around if you're playing a pirate game.
Because to me, table presence is not just what it looks like, but it's like how it feels and how it sounds. It's the
whole aesthetic.
It's kind of a complete package.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Good pick.
Yeah, and there's actually a few that made my honorable mention list just for that fact alone.
Well, I can't wait to hear about that later.
Yeah, definitely.
Number 9.
My number 9 is a game that came out years ago, but had a reprint by Restoration Games called Fireball Island.
Oh, that's a good pick.
And the reason I picked this game is because just the 3D presence of this game on your table is impressive. So you've got these. It's a theme about your adventures. Think Indiana Jones, going around an island that has an active volcano, and you're trying to get as much treasures as you can before essentially getting hit by all these fireballs.
It's kind of like Kong Island, but with no monsters.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good description. But the island itself
or Skull Island, I guess.
A Skull Island. That's the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
you know what I'm talking about.
I knew what you meant. But the island itself is made up of these three pieces that are molded plastic that sit up several inches. I mean, above the board. So you construct the island, and then the middle piece of the island actually makes kind of a raised surface.
It's very elevated.
Very elevated. Yeah. It's probably like 6 inches or more off the table.
Yeah, at least.
And then on top of the whole thing is this statue of Volcar, which is this nice, 6-inch, 8-inch statue that you're actually putting marbles in the top of that represent fireballs that are cascading down. So all in all, when you have this set up on the table, it just looks awesome. It looks like it has an awesome toy factor, cool design, and people can't help but stop and watch that game when it's sitting on your table. So
and it doesn't play that long either. So
it's not. If
you're playing it at a convention, I find that people stick around and they're like, "How much left? Because I want to try this."
Yeah, well, it's cool to see just the marbles rolling down the chutes and knocking players over and stuff.
And that's part of that presence, right? The sound of all these marbles just going crazy.
Like it's just
knocking stuff over.
It brings you back to sort of that nostalgia of games you kind of played in your childhood. But with that game, they've introduced a lot of modern mechanics to it. So it's still great to play now.
Yep.
So that's what made my number 9, Fireball Island.
Excellent. That's a great pick. So my number 9, I think a lot of people will be shocked, not because it made the list, but because, well, it's Scythe.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I know a lot of people would probably rank this a little higher.
Okay.
That's my sort of gut reaction. But I put it on here because of the whole package of how this plays and looks on the table. Similar to how Atlantis Rising has its own table presence. Like Scythe, not only the art itself is always interesting to look at. There's a lot of detail going on. And, like every piece and every card is all consistent and it all matches. But more so, you've got miniatures, you've got wooden pieces, you've got like the recessed boards, and just everything. Once you're at the table, there's so much in front of you that you can't help but focus in on the theme and what you're doing as part of the game. There's no point where you're kind of like flipping to the side to talk to someone on the side who's not playing.
You're kind of always engaged.
You're always engaged. There's just so much to look at, so much to think about. But to me, it's not just the gameplay that's amazing, but the actual presence, just how it looks, and it draws people in,
Well, plus if you have like the airships expansion and things like that, it looks pretty wild.
There's a lot of upgrades and expansions that Side has, not to mention Rise of Fenris.
Yes.
And all of these add new components and new interesting things that stand up or kind of look really nice on the board and on the map. So I'm very impressed with Scythe overall. So I wanted to put it on this list, and that's why it's my number 9.
See, normally it's on my list because it's one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game. Spoiler, I actually didn't include it on my list, but only because, for one, I had been including it on a lot of my lists recently.
On like every list.
On a lot of lists, yeah. But the other thing too is, I agree with 100% of everything you said. Because I considered another game by the same company's Tapestry for similar reasons.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of when you walk by, sometimes the games that have miniatures and all that stuff, they kind of all look alike as far as, that's a big miniatures game, So the only reason I didn't include it on my list was, although I think the artwork is probably the best, for me, I wanted to go after stuff that was different, and I would think that like if my brother was like walking by, would that stop him versus maybe something else? So that was kind of my mindset. Well, it might with the airships.
I could see that.
It might with the airships.
Personally, if I had never played Scythe or seen Scythe and I saw someone playing it, I would stop.
You want to do it? Yeah, as a gamer,
I would look and I would stop and I'd be like, wow, that looks really cool and interesting.
What are you guys playing?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's a great pick.
I think you have at this point played it so many times. It might not just the novelty of how it is and how
the wonder
looks
gone
has sort of lost.
Have I lost the innocence?
I think.
Is that the problem?
Yeah, I think you've lost it.
Well, hey, I'm glad that this made it your list. That's all I'll say.
I feel like it should be represented, and there it is. It's on my list.
Awesome. I'm not going to complain about that at all.
Number 8. For number 8, I picked a game that is more of a medium weight games that you can play with your family, your kids even. It's a bidding game, but it's about a race. And this is the second edition of Camel Up.
Yeah.
This
definitely
is,
second edition.
The second edition is quite amazing to look at. And once you unfold the board for the first time and you realize that it's like a pop-up book for that first, moment, and there's all these palm trees that just pop right out, and you're like, whoa, is that even necessary for the game? No, but they did it anyway.
But it looks good.
They're like,
looks awesome.
It's going to be an eye-catching, feature of the game. You just look at it and you're like, wow, there's something cool happening here. What's going on? But that's not it, because that's just opening the board. Then you've got the dice rolling.
Yeah, it's like the pyramid for the
It's not a dice tower. It's like a dice rolling selection device.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's a good enough description.
That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
It's a pyramid, right? And then you like press the button, lift it up, and then it drops a single die on one of its sides, and that's how you get your randomized rolls and stuff. Not only does it have those cool 3D components, but part of the mechanics of the game are the camels themselves that actually stack up on top of each other. I think that hence Camel Up. Right?
Yep.
And as the game plays, of course, they're moving all around the board, and it's just a simple like one lap track that you're looking at. And I just feel like the whole theme sort of matches really nicely.
Yeah, all the artwork in the game is great. The board itself, artwork is great. This one just barely. This is one of my honorable mentions because I love that game. And it's one of those ones where the first time somebody sees it, they're just like, "What are you guys playing?"
It's just immediately intriguing, and you want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And it is medium weight, so there's not that much more to learn because it's a more simple gameplay. But it does have table presence, and it commands people's attention when they walk by and they want to say, "Hey, what's that game? And how fun is that?"
Yeah.
And
Good pick.
It's really good.
I love that game. My number 8 is a game, kind of following the 3D nature of presence on the table board. Is a game that was actually Spiel des Jahres winner years ago, but they've made a reprint that looks similar to Camel Up. It looks amazing, and it's called Manhattan. And this game doesn't get a whole lot of love. This was actually on one of my lists of underappreciated games. I think.
One of our early lists.
And what looks so great on this game is you actually have these. You have a board that's really colorful board. It represents different parts of the city of Manhattan. In New York. Like the different boroughs or however you want to call it.
If it wasn't like representing Manhattan,
it would
say
be weird.
They failed
like
marketing.
Santorini, New York or something.
Right.
One of those weird.
Yeah, they did do that, didn't they?
They did do that.
It's so weird.
The reason that looks so cool is all the colors, everything is really bright colors, really sort of eye-popping colors on the board itself. But then you have these translucent skyscraper pieces that come in different sizes. So you have some that are, I think, 5 levels high, 4 levels high, 3, 2, 1 level high. So as the game progresses, you continue to stack these skyscrapers and make them higher and higher and higher and higher on the board. So at the end of the game, because you can also stack on other people's boards, and one of the end of round point scores is who has the highest skyscraper, you end up with this board that just has these really tall, beautiful looking, sort of, again, translucent glass looking skyscrapers that are just all over the board in this really cool area control style game that's totally family weight. Anybody can play. So it's one of those ones where, again, somebody walks by, they see it on the table, and they're just like, what is that game? It just looks really fun to play with. So Manhattan is the one that made mine number 8.
When you're describing that, it makes me also think of the recent Blue-Orange game, Cloud City.
Oh, yeah, with the 3D. Yeah. I like that game a lot.
And that's also similar, where you've got tiles that you build out, and then you can place the different 3 sizes of buildings.
Think of that game, but think of stacking those sizes on top of one another.
And making it even bigger,
Yeah, because you can end up with something that's, like 13, 14 inches off the table.
That's pretty cool.
So that looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Number 7.
My number 7 is one of the most popular games of all time. And some people might even yell if I didn't put this on the list.
Magic the Gathering.
It's not the Magic the Gathering, no.
Catan.
No, okay. It's Wingspan.
Shock.
I think this is one that would be in a lot of top 10 lists if you survey people. The artwork is just amazing. It's a game about birds that has sort of an engine building element to it, a set collection element to it, and I mean everything from the artwork of these birds themselves, which are on cards that look literally like kind of Audubon style artwork. All these are painted, unique art styles of birds, and
it's like the kind of artwork you'd find in an encyclopedia or National Geographic.
Yeah, very almost photorealistic, painting style.
Yeah, it's very well done.
There's over 100 some cards, 130 cards in the game that have these birds,
and they're all unique, right?
They're all unique. The player boards themselves look like field journals, and you open them up, and they've got this beautiful sort of scene of sort of this grassland and this wetland. It comes with a cardboard dice tower that looks like a bird feeder. I mean, everything, wooden dice. Everything about this game just is just beautiful. It's just a work of art, this game. So I think, and the artwork is also done exclusively by women in this game too.
Which is right?
Yeah, I think Beth Sobel did a lot of the graphic design and the box art. And then there were two, and I'm forgetting their names, two artists who did all the bird cards. So just two artists have done hundreds of these cards by now and do just an amazing job. So yeah, love the game. Wingspan looks great, and it's definitely one of those eye-catching games that you can't miss when you walk by it.
Yep, and it's still extremely popular. A couple years here out of its release.
It's still selling, it's still in the top 10 games that are selling.
I want to say Stonemaier's number one selling game.
It is, yeah. Still. They've almost got, I think, 800,000 copies sold.
Followed by, I think, Viticulture.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, my number 7 pick, I feel like I've got you on this compared to Wingspan.
Oh, okay. This has to be good.
Yeah. This is actually in my top 10, probably favorite games, actually.
Okay.
It's, first of all, the artwork, of course, is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The cards, the board, and has a huge 3D component. It's called Everdell.
Yeah.
And you build up this little cardboard tree, or the wooden one if you bought that through the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And it sits on the board. It actually holds both your extra meeples that you earn through the game, which are all custom cut wooden pieces for your own faction. But again, they're different critter types. And then the second level of the tree holds the various, I think they're events or objectives
or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Those cards that you can earn once throughout the game if you can. But the board itself, it sits around. It's kind of got this unique. It's nothing about it is standard. It's not a cube, or it's not a rectangle, a square. It's a fully cut, artistic representation of a meadow with a little creek running through it. And there's even designated spaces for where the tokens, the resources that you would put that gather there. Talking about tactile
squishy
feel of these resources, those berries.
Yeah,
those are exciting to just squeeze and hold, and they're just kind of this rubbery feel.
Yeah, they've got resin, they've got berries, they've got little twigs and stones, I think.
Stones,
and the stones
pebbles.
look like smooth river stones too.
Smooth little pebbles.
Yeah.
Just everything about this, it's so engaging, and just you look at it and you want to again sit at the table and just watch people play it.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be building out their own little town with the cards that they play, and so everyone's got this whole unique looking tableau that sits in front of you. And again, the artwork's so great.
The card artwork is amazing by Andrew Bosley.
Everywhere you look, there's just something awesome to look at. And again, the artwork is so detailed. Once again, you could look at all these cards and just be like, I just want to get this on the table.
Yeah, this made both of our top 10 box arts too.
Yep.
Because we loved just the look of that design by Andrew Bosley.
But that art doesn't stop at the box. So let me tell you.
The whole game looks like that.
And so I recommend you try it. It's a wonderful worker placement game and tableau building. So
yeah,
it's just great.
No argument for me there. That's a great pick.
Number 6. Number 6 for me is going to be a game that takes up all of your table. It's primarily a 2-player game. There's tons of miniatures.
I have a guess here.
And it has a very strong IP behind it.
Yeah, it's a Star Wars game, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's Star Wars Rebellion.
Yep.
I mean, even years after its release and so many other Star Wars games that have come out and prior to it, it's still, for me, the gold standard of tabletop Star Wars experience. Obviously, not every game is going to play out like the movies, but it could. And that's what's interesting. You could actually try to make it and replay the movie. But part of it is trying to subvert your opponent, who you've got one player as the Imperials and the other as the Rebels. And the Rebels players, they get to secretly pick their where their rebel base is on whatever planet, and it takes 2 fold-out boards to make the whole map of the space universe.
It's bigger than most 4-player games.
Yes, it is. It's oh wow, it's just impressive once you even fold that thing out. But then once you start putting all those miniatures on the board,
you get the
there's
Death
ground
Stars
troops, there's spaceships, there's Death Stars. You could have 2 Death Stars, maybe even 3.
Maybe with the expansion.
I think it's 2 or 3.
At least 2.
And then the expansion adds in, familiar characters from Rogue One, which is also cool. But it's essentially, you can play out a lot of the events of the early Star Wars movies, 4, 5, and 6. And when you just look at it, it's just amazing. It takes up so much space, but everyone's familiar with these, characters and the ships, and it's so well designed that you're like, this is something that I got to try, moving the pieces around, having space battles and ground battles.
It definitely leaves you with that like epic feeling when you're done playing it.
It feels epic. It looks epic. And because it's a 2-player game, it's also very, it's in your mind, like those mind games of like trying to subvert where you are and where you're going to be moving and why are you placing this there? Is it because your base is there, or, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. There's a lot of that sort of stratego sort of, bluffing.
A little bit of bluffing.
You could put a lot of, your forces on a particular planet, hoping that to draw them there. So yeah, it's and it plays very symmetric or asymmetrical game too. Depending on what side you're playing on. So
and if you play it once, you want to swap and try the other side. It's just that kind of game. It does take a while to play, but man, this is, when I think table presence.
It doesn't feel like it takes a while, even though it is. Like
you're right.
It's like a 3-hour game maybe.
Yeah, it's like when you watch, a long movie, and it doesn't feel like it was long.
Because it's so good.
It's so engaging, and it's so active, and, you're just all in.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, I like that one. I like that one a lot.
So tell me about your number 6.
My number 6 is one that I actually mentioned earlier in the video. It's also primarily a 2-player game.
Okay.
And it's Santorini.
Oh, well, how about that?
Yeah, and Santorini, it's definitely a smaller game. It's not an epic game at all. It's an abstract game.
It's like a small version of Manhattan.
It's a small version of Manhattan. But what I really like about the game is it also has a really nice 3D presence. So you've got this base that looks like kind of like the brown kind of cliff, like rock, similar to Santorini. And then you have the board that sits on top of that base, so it's already elevated, several inches above the table. And then you have these really beautiful buildings that look like Santorini. They're all white with these nice, beautiful, like blue caps to the building.
Picturesque.
Very picturesque. So as you're playing the game, you're building up these. You're building the buildings. And then moving your little characters around, and you're trying to essentially get to the 3rd level of the building before your opponent can. And the caps for the buildings are how you sort of stop your opponents from getting to that level. So as the game progresses, you've got this beautiful little island city that looks like the city of Santorini in Greece. And so it's one of those where even though I've seen it a lot of times, when you see 2 players playing it, I always just stop and kind of look, because the board evolves and
it's always
differently. It's always unique when they finish it. So for me, this was just a simple, clean design, but one of the ones that I think still stands out, and that's why it's my number 6, Santorini. It also, I should mention, it also has really cool art design on the cards themselves, the god powers.
If you use the powers.
Yeah, so you don't see that as much on the table, but it's also great to look at as you're playing the game as well.
And I do think it plays well with 2 players.
Yeah, I think it's best at 2. It's definitely best at 2. You can play it at 4, but it's almost like, you feel like, well, hey, I could just be playing this by myself instead of waiting for my opponent or my partner to do something. So, so yeah, but it's a good one.
Number 5.
My number 5 is a game that I've actually just discovered pretty recently. I think it came out 2 years ago, and there's actually a new Kickstarter out soon that's in the same universe, and that is a game called In the Hall of the Mountain King. This game, it's got wonderful colors. The theme is about your dwarves, and you're trying to reclaim your mountain, and you're doing that by sort of tunneling into the mountain using these Tetris-style pieces. But there's all these different sort of statues and pillars on the board that have these really pretty. They're sort of variants of typical board game colors. So, you know, the blue is kind of like a baby blue, and the orange is like a little more like a fall autumn color.
Burnt orange.
Burnt orange, yeah. And so they're all familiar colors, but they're really warm, sort of a warm palette of colors.
They fit together.
They fit together nicely. The board itself is although it's just, you know, primarily a grid, it's also very colorful. It has kind of a gradient look to it as well. And as you're, you know, everybody's building these tunnels, and there's all these statues around the board. Plus, you have all your dwarf cards, which make sort of a pyramid, and you've got gems and tokens and things like that. It takes up a lot of space, but it's really just a gorgeous game. One of the prettiest sort of games that I've seen that is very sort of simple in its art design, but kind of makes a big impact, is the way I would describe it.
Elegant, I guess.
Yeah, very elegant. And I think Kwanchai Moria did the box art, so it has a really striking sort of box art image as well. But yeah, this is a game that is it's quickly becoming one of my favorite games. And it's just fun to play with and fun to just look at, especially when you're done and you just see how much the board has changed from when you started. You know, so I love games like that where there's this visual progression that kind of happens throughout the game. So
this is one you've brought up many times, and I've still yet to play it.
Yeah, and it's funny, we've actually brought it to a couple of our game days, and you know, just wasn't one that we ended up playing.
I think we got close one time, and then we just ran out of time.
We did, yeah. So so I think you'll really like this one when you try it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a good one.
My number 5 is a game from Awaken Realms, because how can you talk about table presence?
I knew this would be on your list
without talking about an Awaken Realms game.
Yeah.
And there's so many that are great they've made that can make this list. But for right now, I'm talking about Lords of Hellas.
Oh, okay. You know, I you know where I thought you were going to go.
I know where you thought I was going.
Ether Fields is where I thought you would go.
Yeah.
Even though I know you love
Nemesis.
Nemesis. I couldn't think of the name the best. But yeah, that's a great pick. I actually didn't think of that game when I was making my list.
Well, we just played it.
We did just play it.
So
too.
Lords of Hellas, you've got this futuristic but yet Greek mythological with mechanical tech and just kind of a reimagined
cool
sort
style.
Of like ancient Greece. Like if you know, if everyone was like, I don't know, somehow infused with mechanoids, and yet there's also just your typical Greek like monsters, but they're also
have some sort
mechanical in some way.
It's almost like Greek with steampunk, crossed with steampunk or something.
A little bit
similar
like
to that. I don't know.
So it's got this beautiful, colorful board. Again, it's going to take up your whole table.
Huge board.
Huge. You've got these at least 3 different monuments that get placed out, and over the course of the game, there's 5 individual pieces that get added or can be added to these monuments. And one of the ending conditions of the game is completing a single monument with all 5 of its pieces. And these things tower like 8-9 inches tall. At least.
They're massive.
Each one is unique. Each one's impressive. They're all a monument themed after a particular Greek god. So the base game has, you know, Zeus, Athena, and Hermes.
Sure.
And and on top of that, it's area control. You can battle other players with your armies. You can move your hero around, who doesn't actually do battles, but he can go on quests and he can fight monsters, because there's monsters in the game who can destroy your armies,
which are also huge.
And there's so many monsters that can come out, and it's always random. And anyway, the game is amazing. It looks great. The feel of just building these monuments is just awesome. The monuments are also functional, because at the bases, there's 2 openings for your priest character.
That's right.
And so you get up to 4, but you have to earn them. And on your turn, you can place a priest on one of those little monument openings to gain
like
the
special
blessing
ability.
of that particular god. And depending on how high that monument is, that blessing is better.
Right.
So if you want a particular attribute raised or something like that, you're incentivized to build that particular monument, higher, faster.
And then put your priest. Yeah.
And so, just the way it plays, it's very tight. There's so many ways to win because you can kill monsters, you can control lands, which are color-coded as well. You can
build so many monuments to win too.
And then control temples.
Yeah.
You can also build temples, which also have miniatures. You can control cities, which have their own miniatures. And again, the cities are functional if you have the miniatures because there's a spot in there for one of your warriors or, Spartans to occupy, and they're like fortifying the city and all that kind of stuff. There's just so much to this game.
A lot going on in the game too. Yeah, it's definitely a lot going on in the game.
There's so much to it, and I've just scratched the surface. So if you've never played it or seen it, you really need to look into it and try to find a copy because even the base game, fantastic.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking of this one when I put my list together, but I agree with you. I think this has a better table presence than like Scythe, which I would put in the same sort of space as far as a miniatures type game. So yeah, really good pick.
Number 4. For my number 4 pick, this is a game that's already been mentioned on this video. And it's also a not rethemed, but a redone version of a classic game called Fireball Island: The Curse of Volcar, which is the full new title of the game, just to separate it from the original.
Yep.
Not to say that you don't know the name of the game.
No, I totally forgot that.
Because he doesn't. This reminds me of...
I did forget that. Excuse me.
This reminds me of The Office when, Dwight Schrute's like, I love the movie Willy Wonka. He's like, it's not called Willy Wonka.
It's Willy Wonka.
And the Chocolate Factory.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's anyway, just poking fun.
The Curse of Volcar. That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So for all the reasons that he's already mentioned, it's got amazing table presence, the sights, the sounds, just the chaotic nature of it. When you walk by, you just want to watch what's happening and maybe even join in for a second play because it doesn't take that long to end. And the quality is really nice for what it is. The only downside is the box itself.
Oh, the box is horrible.
I don't understand why they did this. It's like the cheapest.
Well, it was literally like they went so nostalgic. They did one of those like throwback boxes, like Parker Brothers type boxes. That is so thin.
Yeah,
and
it's like the thinnest cardboard box you can find.
It's really bad.
Like if you're buying a sweater. And you
it's like a Christmas sweater.
And you get a box from Macy's, and it's like a one-time use. You get it home, and now it's broken. That's the kind of box that this is.
That's exactly the kind of box it is.
But that's not why it's on the list. It's on the list because the game is amazing, and it looks so good on the table.
And if you happen to have a really large sweater that you'd like to give as a Christmas gift, well, we've got the perfect box for you.
Exactly.
Good pick. Yeah, I was wondering how much crossover we'd have.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one worth crossing over on.
I agree. Good pick.
All right, what about you?
My number 4 is a game by one of my favorite designers, Bruno Cathala. And it's not Five Tribes, which almost made my list because I think Five Tribes looks really cool on the table. But it's a game that came after Five Tribes, but is also often compared to it. And that is a game called Yamatai. This game is
also very highly rated.
Yeah, it's not only a it has kind of a Japanese theme to the game. Has a lot of really great artwork you have boats, you have different temple pieces, all really big chunky wooden pieces that are all these nice colorful pieces. But the board itself has a bunch of different islands on them, and then flowers around the islands that are also really pretty. So when you're putting all these tokens on the board, and including the temples and the buildings and the coins and everything else, not to mention your player boards, which are all beautiful artwork and unique, it's just an eye-popping game that just looks like a work of art on the table. And it's a great game to boot too. It's a really neat game where I'd say it's very abstract. It's not super thematic, but the things you're doing, very much like a Five Tribes, I would say. I would describe it very much like that. But it's one where, to me, it makes it to the table more because of how good it actually looks.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some games. And
sometimes you just want to open a game and play it because of the memory of just
it
how
makes
it
you feel
looks.
good. It just makes you feel it's fun to play with, you know, and it's like a beautiful work of art that you can just, you know, enjoy staring at, you know, for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Yamatai edged out a few other games because of sort of how bright and beautiful I think the art style and just the whole aesthetic and how it just comes together so nicely, and that's why it made my number 4.
And that's like a Euro game, but
yeah, it's very Euro style.
It's unusual that a Euro game would fit this kind of table presence.
That's right.
List.
And I should have mentioned it's a Days of Wonder game, and I think that's the difference.
They do a good job with
because they
brightening up and really
almost everything that
great.
they make, you know, is really well put together and really good quality. So so yeah, to me they knocked it out of the park with Yamatai.
Excellent. No, that's a great pick. Number 3. My number 3 pick is probably the lightest game on my list, but it's one that I immediately think of when I think of what's a game that has great table presence, regardless of how many rules it might have. And I'm going to go with Giant Rhino Hero.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, even Rhino Hero
itself is a table presence commanding game. But if you can pick up the giant version,
another level. You pretty much have to start on the floor with that.
You kind of do, you know, and it has to be a level floor, no carpet. Yeah. So if you haven't heard of or played Rhino Hero, it's a Haba game. So it's a family weight or kids weight game, like 7 and under almost. And essentially you've got these roof cards and folded sides, like house
walls,
sides. Yeah. And you're building a single apartment complex that's straight up. And so you're going to put, you know, your 2 folded sides of the building, and then you place one of your roof cards on it, and then depending on the roof card that you play, it's going to tell the next person where they have to align the folded sides. And sometimes those cards have abilities like reversing turn order or making the next person draw an extra card, because the point is to try to get rid of your roof cards first, and not to be the one who knocks over the tower. Now it's Rhino Hero because the theme is there's this rhino Meeple that you have that like flies around and up the tower, because some of the roof cards have a little circular spot meant for the Meeple.
And it's a pretty solid Meeple too. It's not lightweight.
No, it's a piece of wood. Like it's like an inch and a half tall or so. And it's screen printed or painted or something like that. So it's good, and it's got weight to it. Now, if you're building this out of cards, now you have to be very careful to both pick him up from wherever he was and place him on the spot where he's supposed to go without making the tower fall. Now, if you're playing the giant version, which is what my pick is, it's just, man, it's epic. This is a game that you have to play at a convention.
I was going to say that's the only place I've seen
that's where you play
large game is at the convention.
And you get as many people as you can play, that can do it, and you just go for as big as you can, really. And it's just a blast, and it's like I said, it's a game that as soon as I think about it,
it looks like a kid's game, but it's great.
It's
great for adults. To me, this is a Jenga killer.
Yes,
it's that good.
Absolutely is.
Yeah, I would play this over Jenga.
And it's got enough of that strategy, but also like just actual the physicality of dexterity, that anyone can play it. Like heavy gamers can play it. It takes 5-10 minutes sometimes. And you can play it with kids, and the theme is also very appropriate for kids. So that's
really good
pick.
Pick. Yeah, that's a really good pick. I love it. My number 3 is a game that has already been mentioned as well, and that's Everdell. I could not have this on my list. In fact, this game looks so good, and especially when you put it, all the expansions also kind of fit into this
unique
main board, which has, like I said, it's a unique shaped board, but they fit like puzzle pieces into the main board to give you like a river, and you have pearls where you can dive into the river. The new expansion that's on Kickstarter now has like a train station that fits on one side. You've got like
every side of the board that can expand now.
And in fact, in some cases, they went so far to make this game look good that it kind of interferes with gameplay. And what I mean by that is because of that huge Everdell tree that's in the at the top of the board. If you're not sitting kind of around the board in a specific way,
on one side of the tree,
it's really hard for you to see the board because the tree's in the way. But I will never play without it because it just looks so good. So yeah, this is a great 3-player game for that reason to me. It's also
you can always set up the tree and just set it somewhere else.
You can do that.
I mean, you don't have to place it where it says.
Yeah, I have to always put it where it says, and then I just make everybody crowd around.
So one of the expansions, Belfair, is attempting to fix that.
Yeah, because you move the tree, right?
Yeah, you remove the tree, and all the things that would be on the tree are on the Belfair board, in addition to other things.
Yeah, but I just love that tree. I love that tree so much. But yeah, Everdell is just, I mean, everything about the game, the art style, the aesthetic of it, it almost made my number one because I think so highly of it. But that's why it made my number 3. So
it's an excellent game, and I totally agree with how high this is.
Yeah, and one of my favorite games of all time as well. So.
Number 2.
My number 2 game is by my favorite designer / artist / game publisher, Ryan Lockett.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a game by Red Raven Games called Islebound. And the reason I picked Islebound is one thing I just love Ryan Lockett's art style. There's just something about his artwork that sort of transports me into that world that he's building. But with Islebound, the board itself is this really similar to Everdell. It's this really uniquely shaped board. It almost is. I was going to say it almost looks like a diamond or a gemstone shaped board, where it has it's kind of curved and pointed on the edge, but all these pieces fit together similar to a puzzle as well. And it's a big ocean board with different islands represented on it. And you're sailing around, you're having adventures, you're collecting things, you're fighting sea monsters. And of course, he's got the artwork throughout the game as well, and the cards and everything else. And this is just one of those games that it looks so good on the table. It's one of those kind of Yamatai style works of art that for me, like I would put that out on my table just to look at it, even if I wasn't playing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I was just leaving a game set up. I just really love his art style on all his games, and so I had to have a Ryan Lockett game, and this one made it way up there. So for me, that's why it made my number 2, Islebound.
I gotta say, I'm not really surprised.
Yeah,
you bring up Ryan Lockett games quite a bit.
I do. He was also made two of my favorite box arts, I think.
Right. I will say, like a number of recent lists we've discussed, you've brought it up. So
yeah. So no surprise there. But maybe that it's that high on my list.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 2 is going to be a very popular choice, I think. This came out 2018, I want to say.
Okay.
And it's a medium weight game, but you can play it with pretty much anybody. There's not that many complicated rules to it, but everything about it fits the theme, and it's very, just sort of synergistic in that way. It's called Photosynthesis.
Yeah.
And, as you start the game, you get to place out some smaller trees, but then as the game proceeds, all these trees can start to grow, and then new trees come out, and all of a sudden this empty forest, clearing just gets populated with all these varying sizes trees, and not only varying sizes, but everyone's color tree.
It's totally different. Yeah.
So it's just a mix of all these different color trees, and it's just, you've grown a forest.
Like a beautiful fall scene almost.
Yeah. And it's just, it's a very pleasant thing to look at as you're playing, regardless of the gameplay and everything else. It's very tight gameplay as well. It's a very strategic placement and timing type of game. On like when to plant and when to grow and like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very much abstract in that way, but very, very, really clever game.
And I think not only does it look great, and there's this outer piece of the board that not only keeps track of rounds, and it's part of the gameplay. It's the sun piece that fits on these little outer corners. I think there's like 6 spots for it, something like that. And so not only does that fit the theme and actually collecting light, which becomes the points that you use to spend, but it's a round tracker. It's just functional, but visually it's very, it's elegant.
Yeah.
in its design and simplicity.
Yeah, because it's a useful piece of art, basically.
Yeah, and it's just got a lot of just character that you just want to look at it. And it doesn't take long to play. I mean, maybe 30, 40 minutes max.
Yeah, it's not a long game.
And, I recommend it. Probably 2 or 3 players, I think is best.
I think so. Yeah, and it's funny. I think I kind of suffer with this the same thing I do with Scythe, is I'm so used to this game, it just kind of automatically would make my list.
Yeah.
I didn't include it. It was on my honorable mentions as well, but I think it's because I've included this on several lists as well too. So, I just it edged off mine. But again, I think it's just because of familiarity. But man, it's a gorgeous looking game.
Yeah, the color and artwork and all that stuff really help it, to stand out.
Yeah, and Wingspan may be like two of the ones that may be two of those popular ones if you had to survey people.
Of the ones we've named, probably.
Yeah, and Everdell, of course. I think Everdell would be up there
and
too.
Depending on the popularity or nostalgia of our fan base, Fireball Island might also be on there.
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
good pick.
That's my number 2. Honorable mentions. So we're going to talk a little bit about our honorable mentions before we get to our number 1 picks, which is what we like to do because, again, as we said at the beginning of the video, this is a tough list to make. There's so many great games that you can put out here. I'm only going to mention a few, maybe 3, 4, maybe 5.
Yep.
All right. So there's first thing that comes to mind was Ishtar. And this is a really interesting game about like growing things in the desert. And as things start to develop, the trees, the bushes, and all these like gems that populate the map, it's just very like bright and sort of, you feel like you're adding life to what's going on. Like you're adding life to the desert. And so by the end of it, you're like, wow, this is so cool looking. But I felt like because it's sort of, it progresses that way that I couldn't really put it on my top 10 on such a close call there.
Right, especially at the beginning of the game.
If at the beginning of the game you're like, what is this, right?
Yeah.
But as you get going, you feel really cool because like you're slowly growing everything in the desert.
That title sounds familiar, but I cannot picture it in my head. So
you'll have to look it up later.
I'll have to look it up later. Yeah. This is a pretty recent, newer game, right?
A couple of years ago.
Okay. What's your next one?
Okay.
Or just bounce back and forth?
Yeah, no, whatever.
Yeah, so mine is kind of a weird pick because it's not beautiful by any means, but you can't deny the table presence of Pitch Car.
Okay.
I mean, Pitch Car is just a game it's a huge racing game where you're flicking these little discs that represent race cars around this winding kind of track, and it literally takes up like an entire table or more. So when you have a bunch of people standing up around the table, with this big, huge racetrack, you can't stop but
so that
take a
same
look at that.
sort of thought, you cool put like Ice Cool.
You could put Ice Cool, especially if you combine the games. So it didn't make my list because there's nothing really beautiful about it, but it's definitely one that makes people stop and stare.
So another great game that has some really cool table presence is Tajuto, which is a really interesting sort of game where you're placing these cubes for blessings on these various pyramids, which become like an altar, and there's like, I want to say 8 or 9 altars that slowly get built up, and it's a like kind of a bag drawing game where you're planning ahead, but you're also like randomly trying to put these on. And again, once all of these get built up, it just kind of blossoms into this really interesting looking board. But for the same reason that I can't really put Ishtar, it starts out pretty basic, with just the bottom levels of these things.
I have never even heard of this game before.
We'll have to try it.
Yeah, definitely. You own this one?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So another one for me, I'm going to combine 2 here. I'm going to combine Sagrada and Azul Stained Glass of Sintra. For the same kind of reasons. They both have these really beautiful sort of translucent pieces. They both look like stained glass, on your table. Really pretty, really aesthetically pleasing. And both of those games, I think, are just not only beautiful to look at, but they're fantastic games as well.
Another one that made my honorable mention is Feudum, which is probably the heaviest game you'll ever play.
Or me.
Or anybody. The board is just huge. It's like super long. It's a rectangular, and it's got just the best looking art you'll find. It looks like colored pencil throughout. But everything is functional. You'll find, like birds in a line that actually measure. It determines the aircraft's lanes that they can take. You've got bubbles for the submarine, and you've got waves, which indicate the paths for your ships.
It's pretty cool.
And it's all integrated very well into the art and all that kind of stuff.
I love it when games do that.
But I feel like the overall theme is kind of lost in the gameplay. It's a very awesome, I love this game. But because it's so heavy and there's so many choices and stuff, I felt like that can sort of, in a sense, undermine or even overthrow just how awesome the board looks.
Because it's just so busy in a way.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because there's so much to think about in that game that the last thing, you don't even have time to sort of appreciate the art sometimes.
Yeah.
So I didn't put it on there.
I get that. My next one is Century Gollum Edition. Century Spice Road's a great game, and the Gollum Edition just elevates it because you've got these crystals that you're using instead of spices. You've got this Disney-like style or DreamWorks style, Pixar style
sort of, yeah.
artwork on the cards for these golems. Just a really pretty game when it comes to table presence, and one that stands out. So that made my my pick as well. All the Gollum editions of those games, actually.
Sure. Another one of my honorable mentions is Pillars of the Earth. And again, that's solely because of the board art itself.
Yeah, Michael Menzel. Yeah, he's great.
Man, it's just amazing board to look at. It's just so well designed, but the artwork in it itself is just it's just so good. But if that's all it was, I felt like I couldn't put it on the list because that's not quite enough table presence for me to say.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're looking for great artwork on a board, Pillars of the Earth.
Yeah, and my last one I'll mention is a game called Rescue Polar Bears.
Okay.
And this is a cool co-op game. It's sort of a polar scene with floating ice. But what really makes this game stand out is it has these little resin polar bears that are just adorable.
Are they holding a Coca-Cola bottle?
They're not holding. They could be, but there's like a mama and a papa and these little baby bears. And you put them on these ice floats, Cubs. Yeah, yeah, that's right. I'm thinking Goldilocks. But you see them floating on these ice, and you're trying to rescue them, And it's an adorable game that's actually quite a good crunchy cooperative.
So it's like Don't Break the Ice?
It's not, no. It's much more complex than that. But it's, yes. You want to save the bears. You don't want to break the ice. But you can break the ice as an action.
Anyway.
So, but yeah, that's a cute one and looks cool on the table.
So my last pick, I think it would make the list if it were the standard, but this is Giant Takenoko.
Yeah.
Right? Because Takenoko by itself looks really cool and great, but I felt like overall, there's plenty other games that are better on the table, but if you're playing the Giant Takenoko edition, that is something that it's just awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
So that's one I put on my honorable.
Yeah. I had others, but I'll stop there.
Okay, moving on. We're ready to talk about our number one pick. Number one. My number one pick, all right, for best table presence game is probably a game a lot of people have never heard of or played. It's best at 2 players, and this is a cooperative game called Minara. Jay and I played it once or twice.
Cool game.
Very cool game.
We beat it.
We did beat it. All right, it's a very difficult game to win.
It was hard to beat. Yeah, hard game.
It's a game that has all these unique and very variable cut-shaped cardboard island pieces that are double-sided. There's the dark side and light side, and depending on what card you pick, that determines what board you have to place. But over the course of the game, players are constantly using their wooden column cylinders, to place strategically on their matching colored circles on any number of available tiles. And once a tile is completed with all their circles filled in, you must add a new tile to something. And anywhere you can fit it is allowed. And so you kind of randomly pick one from the box, and then you have to place it. And that's what I meant about which side has to be face up, because they're different, and which color, circles and spots available are dependent on that. And as you play, you just get this unique shaped looking tower that slowly climbs upwards. And part of how you win, you have to reach a certain level and the table level doesn't count. So level 1, 2, 3, it gets higher and higher. And every time that you can't complete a card that you draw, you basically increase the difficulty of how high your tower must be in order to win. But just getting the tower high enough isn't going to end the game. And that's where it really, comes down to the dexterity of both players or all the players who are in the game.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's really tough because you either have to use all of the columns in the bag or go through all the cards or run out of tiles.
Yeah.
I mean, they want you to max out this thing as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very difficult, but it's such an amazing table presence game that after like 2 turns, it's just awesome. Right?
Yeah,
Would you say?
I agree. It looks, because it's such a unique looking structure, and the way that it sort of forms over time is going to make these really weird, random sort of patterns. So no 2 games of this are ever going to play out the same way.
Will never be the same.
Yeah.
And depending on who you're with, like they'll have different ideas on where things should balance. And so there's some like collaboration of like, oh, you shouldn't put it there because it's not going to be balanced. And then someone else will say like, oh, it'll be fine. And then sometimes it's not.
Well, and so we did beat this game, not on the hardest level, right? But we did on the medium level, maybe
medium or easy.
Yeah, it probably wasn't easy.
It could have been easy.
And we found that a fun thing to do was after it's put together is then go through and try to take it apart piece by piece.
One column by column.
And that was a lot of fun too, actually. That was pretty intense.
That was almost as fun as the game itself.
I think it was.
But you can't play that game until you set up the tower, and you can't set up the tower until you play the game.
This was really a neat game. It was one that I wanted to play for a while. I think it's based off an older design game, but they really just revamped like the look and feel of this thing. So it's great components.
And I don't think it has very much distribution in the United States.
Yeah,
it's generally published overseas in Europe.
Yeah. It's still a little bit pricey trying to find this one. I've seen.
But if you can get your hands on this, man, this game's amazing.
A lot of fun.
It's got the best table presence, very photogenic of a game.
You can't argue with that.
Yeah,
can't argue with that.
That's my number 1.
Yeah, good pick. So my number 1 is, you know what it's going to be, I bet, Takenoko. and I will say giant Takenoko. Takenoko itself actually is, I think, an awesome game when it comes to table presence. Sort of kind of to your argument where it doesn't start out like that. You really start out with just one tile, and then you build it up over time. So so near the end of the game is when it looks amazing because you've got all these bamboo shoots sticking up. They're all these different pastel colors, green and yellow and
they're
red.
all bright, like
very bright, and the
yellow.
tiles match the colors, and you've got this cute little panda and the gardener and everything else. So
pre-painted minis.
Yep, yeah, that's true. They're tiny, but they're pre-painted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got the giant version, the giant Takenoko version, and that game is just amazing on the table. And in fact, I wanted to dedicate a game day when I was running the meetup just for giant games, and this was going to be like the showcase game because it looks so good.
Yeah.
And those bamboo pieces are like 2 inches high a piece, and that ends up stacking really high. And it's just it's the kind of game where somebody who's brand new to the hobby that sees that, it instantly draws their attention and makes them want to say, like, what are you guys doing? Because it almost looks like a toy or something that you're sort of constructing and putting together. But when they realize, like, there's an actual, fun game here that you're playing.
There's actually strategy to everything that you're doing.
Yeah. And it actually has even, a little bit of extra strategy where, it's almost a little beyond the gateway in some ways, I think. So to me, this is just, it's always been one of my favorite, and I just love the art style and everything else about the game. So yeah, my number 1, Takenoko or giant Takenoko.
Yeah, and that's why for my honorable mention,
when you said it, I was like, no.
To me, like, just the base game or whatever, just the standard size is good, but because again, you have to build it all up, and it takes a while. And it's kind of only like the end of the game you really appreciate it.
That's a completely fair point too, because one thing I thought too was they make a giant Azul that looks amazing as well.
Right.
But regular Azul, although I think it looks really good, I wouldn't put it in my top 10. Whereas for me, Takenoko, I probably would put it in my top 10 if I was considering sort of what it looks like, midway or near the end of the game. So.
But if Giant Takenoko were more prevalent, or maybe even the standard version, then I definitely would put it on my list.
Yeah, it's almost unbeatable in some ways, I think.
So that's why, for me, regular Takenoko would be 11.
Yeah. So I like that. What, 3 overlaps, maybe something like that.
2 or 3.
Yeah,
I think that's a really cool. Once again, every list that we make, I always think that we're going to have a ton of crossover, and it never happens.
Yeah, surprisingly so. And I think for some like artwork, design, presence, like some of those are somewhat subjective too.
Sure.
Depending on your personal taste.
For instance, you have no artistic appreciation, so your boxes are very bland.
No, that's it. Well, wait, don't get me started on some of the content now.
Come on, Time Stories is the best cover art? You gotta be kidding me.
It's it's like the Apple design. The Apple logo. It's iconic. That's the way I describe it. We don't need to revisit that video. We don't need to go there. Watch that video.
You'll that one instead. That's a good follow-up to this because they're similar.
True. That is true.
Well, that's the end of our lists.
I was just going to say we've got some cool more game designer interviews coming up.
We do.
As well.
We do.
So check those out. We've already put out a few of those, especially around brand new designers who are coming to or are already in Kickstarter with their games.
Mm-hmm.
So those have been really really fun to watch too. And
if you are a game designer listening to our podcast and say, hey, I'd love to talk to these guys about my game, send me an email. We'll try to work it out.
Yeah, let us know. It's been a lot of fun playing some of these prototypes too.
Yeah, totally. So, hey, thanks guys for listening and for watching the video or whatever way you're doing it. We do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun to do these kinds of videos where we just talk about board game stuff.
Yeah, and if you really like it, rate the podcast, give us 5 stars, subscribe, hit that like button. We'd love to see you engage with us, and obviously we love reading your comments too on the YouTube.
And we do our best to try to respond to all those comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you have some interesting topic ideas or things that we could do on the podcast, let us know. We'll consider that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel, this has been Mentor Minutes, and I've been Jay.
And I've been Jared.
And we will catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, so for a Meeple Mentor and the Meeple Man, I almost did it.
You almost did it. It's hard the first time, right?
It is. It's 2 things. So for Meeple Mentor and the I can't do it.
Practice.
One more time. Here we go.